Now, you may be embittered because, and I've heard this mantra from many of my friends, where you all sold us into slavery. And I'm saying that maybe you just don't realize that you're Joseph, who was sold into a foreign land so that you could be the deliverer of the continent somewhere down the road. It's time to change the narrative. But as I said earlier during the interview, it's also time for us to not outsource the responsibility of shaping that narrative to others. Over the years, I've had so many complaints from government officials, from different people. Oh, you know, CNN doesn't like us and BBC doesn't like us, and it's all negative. Hello? Wake up and smell the coffee. It's not their responsibility, it is our responsibility to shape who we are. It is what we call ourselves that the rest of the world will call us. So the question I'd like to pose at this point is very simple. What is it that we have come to believe about ourselves, and what role has the media played in helping to fortify and condition each of our belief systems in this room? Are we just like grasshoppers in our own eyes? Or are we proverbial giant killers able to accomplish the seemingly impossible? I think from everything that we've heard today, we see giant killers even in our midst. Perhaps with the answer to these very simple questions lies both our individual and our collective future. So let me just tell you a story here to make my point. In the 1940s, during World War II, a Jewish concentration camp inmate named Viktor Frankl came to the realization that perception, that is the way we see things, is a life-changing choice. You see, Viktor spent 3 years in some of the most notorious Nazi concentration camps. While in the camp, it dawned on him that he had one single freedom left in life, and that was the power to determine how he responded to man's inhumanity to man. Many of you in this room have been dealt with unkindly by people you never expected to be treated in such a manner by. And you're probably carrying the wounds in your heart and in your soul and in your psyche, and it's prevented you from accomplishing what it is that God has called you to do. You have a choice. You have the power to determine how it is that you respond to those individuals. Well, Viktor, in spite of the deprivations of the Nazi concentration camp, felt that if he chose to imagine, in spite of the barbed wires, the brutality of the guards, the insufficient food, if he just imagined an alternative future, he would make it out of prison alive, and he would go on to teach, which was what his passion was. He was a psychologist. Well, Viktor did survive in the concentration camps, and he went on to teach and became an author. He published a book in 1946 called A Man's Search for Meaning. But I want to quote something that Viktor Frankl wrote. He said, "A human being is a deciding being between stimulus, that is the outside signals that we receive through the totality of our being. There is a space, and in that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies growth and our freedom." Let me say that again. A human being is a deciding being. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is the power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. What was Viktor Frankl saying? He was saying that our perceptions become our realities, and that how we respond to adversity and challenges is a function of choice. Every single one of us in this theater today and listening to this broadcast has a choice to make. Like any other nation, our perceptions of who we are will either imprison us or liberate us. As the saying goes, as a man thinks, and for that matter, a woman, in his heart, so is he. If you think you can, and if you think you cannot, you're right. The difference between possibility and impossibility simply is your imagination. One of the things that is so clear today in what we've heard from speaker after speaker and from our newer tribe to my left is simply the ability to see an alternative future different from the ones that we're living in. So we must understand that the way we perceive things begins when the human brain receives data or feedback from the body's 5 senses. The mind, this is the way the mind works. The mind processes that data, that information, and based on your past experiences, begins to apply meaning to the inputs that it has received. So let me break that down a little bit. If you're married, you have a husband, you have a wife. Maybe you innocently said something to your wife or to your husband, and you got a, what? Or maybe you got a response that you didn't really expect, that was contrary to the good intentions that you had. What happened at that particular moment is not what you said, but what you said triggered a memory from the past that caused your wife or your husband to act in the manner that you just did. For us as a nation, there are things that have happened in our past that regardless of what is said, regardless of what is happening right before our eyes, we prefer to interpret what is said, what is happening, through the lens of the past. It is time for change. In fact, scientists tell us that as human beings, we are not designed to see the world the way that it is, but according to history and according to past experiences. This is one of the reasons why I believe that as a nation that will soon be 60 years old in 2 short years, we have a responsibility to build for the very first time in this nation a National Hall of Fame. Yes, we have national awards and national honors, but we also need a physical presence and a virtual twin in cyberspace where Nigerians of every age, regardless of geographical location, can visit and learn about the labors of our heroes past in order to ensure permanently that their labors are not in vain. This will be a monumental undertaking that will involve a massive number of architects, archivists, historians, photographers, and the goodwill and generosity of Nigerians and a multitude of organizations. But I believe that if we're sincere and if we're going to be true to the words of our national anthem, a National Hall of Fame where we can salute the great men and women who have sacrificed and many have given their all to make this country that we live in what it is today.